Today, join us as we decide the fate of Britain and refight the Battle of Flodden. So today we're not fighting the entire battle in its entirety due to models and space. So we're just fighting the left flank, the Scottish right, with the King's division attacking. So the Battle of Flodden happened in 1513 when Henry VIII was, when at the time King James IV of Scotland was actually Henry VIII's brother-in-law, but Henry VIII, wanting to see glory as he did as an early Renaissance prince, attacked France. Surprise, surprise. And that meant though that Scotland had a treaty of eternal peace with England. That's literally what it's called, the Treaty of Eternal Peace. But then they also had what they called the Old Alliance, which wasn't a formal treaty, but it was a traditional treaty where Scotland and France would aid each other mutually against England. So James decided to answer that and to follow the Old Alliance and attacked England in 1813 with a large army that was fighting in the Swiss style in pike blocks, which was a new technology, a new technique of fighting for them, which James IV had brought into Scotland. So anyway, the army that came to face them was commanded by Lord Surrey. The majority of the English army was in France at the time, underneath Henry VIII, fighting there. So they were really facing the English B team. And the English army was armed in a way that was extremely recognisable, would be recognisable back into the Rose Wars. Was a army made up of largely billmen and longbowmen. The English were outnumbered. The English actually had less artillery than the Scots, but the Scots had dug their artillery into their encampments on the night before, and the English managed to outflank them and was attacking them from the north. So they had to try and move their artillery, which meant at the day the English had a tactical advantage in numbers of artillery. Also, the Scottish artillery was mainly siege artillery and was slower to load. Furthermore, as the battle progressed, the Scottish ended up getting mired down in a boggy patch which was in the middle of the battlefield, and quite a lot of the Scottish pikemen ended up throwing down their weapons and throwing down their pikes to draw their swords instead. So the rule set we are using is pike and shot, and so this isn't how the armies are going to be deployed. This is the historical deployment of the armies. The English army has two medium artillery, has three units of longbowmen, 3 units of billmen, and a single unit of arquebusiers in the far corner. Lord Surrey is commanding this battle, and you have some demi-lance and Highlander cavalry in reserve. The Scottish, you have 6 large pike blocks, the 2 units of crossbowmen, a unit of arquebusiers, 2 units of Highlanders, and a single piece of siege artillery. Their commander is King James IV, who is commanding in the front pike block. So all the rules applying to that are in effect. Additional rules we are using, because quite a lot of the Scottish pike blocks weren't used to fighting with pikes and threw them down in frustration throughout the battle. If at any point a Scottish pike block becomes disordered, then they are going to lose the hedgehog key ability, and that's going to be quite bad, I reckon, when the English cavalry turn up. So how do you think it's going to play out, John?
Anything to do with any wargaming system, doesn't matter what objective you're trying to achieve, it all comes down to the dice.
Yeah. Yes, our old little dicey friends.
The main thing here is that if the Scots units don't get disordered and can make it to the English line, then those pike blocks are going to really rip apart the longbows and the billmen, purely through reach. Well, historically it would have been through reach. Yeah. Now the flip side of that is that it will be the Scots to move forward through rough terrain, which is the bogs, which they don't know about. Just for
people who might not be familiar with pike and shot, so when you come to give an order for a unit to move, you do an order test, and depending on that, you can either move 6 inches, 12 inches, or 18 inches. But if you're moving through difficult terrain, you can only ever move 6 inches. So it should take about 3 turns to cross the difficult terrain.
Yeah. As I was saying, that slow movement rate across the difficult terrain means that they've got up to 3 turns to take fire from the longbows.
Yeah, I think it's going to play down to who will win the artillery duel, because the artillery can play merry hell with their armies. So first order test of the game. So an order test, both our commanders' order rating is 8. So you want to roll dice and try and get 2 dice, add them together and try and get underneath an 8. And I've managed to roll a 10. So yeah, the English aren't going to do anything for the first turn. The first 3 turns were a largely inconclusive artillery duel, which went on for 3 turns as well. A lot of order tests were failed, stopping MD from moving forward.
Move.
Yep. I'm planning to move them in a good position.
Yes, they will.
Hey. It's actually going to happen.
The arquebuses will advance.
Jhon decided to take the initiative and began to advance his troops forwards first. So we're on turn 3 now, and the Scots have made it quite far across the field while taking minimal casualties. So that's putting the English in a bit of a precarious situation. But I think next turn, turn 4, or my turn 3 even, is when everything is about to kick off. So we have our first combat. Into my turn 4, and we've had the first combats here, where the pike units charged in. The pill units charged in. The King's division, the King's company is handbags at dawn with them, while the other Scottish leading pike block managed to defeat and drive back their English compadres.
Unfortunately, due to this Scottish pike block being disordered, they have lost the pikes, which is a historical action that the Scots did. So they've lost their special hedgehog rule. They are now just a unit of infantry.
Yeah. So me thinking I need to get the cavalry on at some point. So they have taken enough. This unit pike of Billman has been crushed by the King's pike and has been destroyed. It's the first casualty of the game. So the technical term for what's going on now is I'm in the shit. So we're going to try and get the reserve cavalry on.
It's an 8.
Yep, they just come on. So we're going to deploy them, and hopefully they can turn the tide of the battle.
Scotch arquebuses have been destroyed in combat with the border horse and demi-lance.
It's like Vienna all over again.
Which is actually quite historical, because the English cavalry did actually do a lot of damage.
Yes, I'm just hoping. I'm hoping to turn around and send them into those pikes. Hopefully, English has lost units on longbowmen. It's not looking good. Well, Jhon is being on point with his dice roll today. All 8 hits, and it quite so good. Beginning of turn 6, and a lot of units have started to get removed. The James IV's unit company almost broke, because he rolled 3 for his morale, for his break test, but we allowed him to have a re-roll because of the presence of the King, and that time they stood their ground. But the English ranks looking pretty thin, so I need to do some pretty spectacular work with my cavalry here. The cavalry did not do as well as expected. Just a quick example of my demonstration of my complete and utter lack of ability to roll dice. So these have been routed. They rolled a 5, so that means they retreat 1 full move, which put them on top of them. And because they can't be placed there, they are destroyed. So that has brought me down to half of my army's value. So I now need to do a test to see if my commander breaks. So I need to get underneath an 8 by adding these numbers on these 2 dice together.
Yep.
So we stand and fight.
For another turn.
So everything's looking a bit shaky, but as the battle's progressed, our commanders have managed to isolate themselves quite far away from the rest of the bodies of their men. So order tests are going to begin to get slightly harder.
Start again.
So the border horse have just been routed. They require an additional army break test.
Fine.
Fine, only just, but fine. Mm-hmm. So it's turn 9, and the English have capitulated and are retreating off after taking horrendous casualties from the Scots. So, not a historical outcome.
Yeah, historically, as we said at the beginning of the video, the Scots lost the battle. They lost their king, as well as 3 out of 4 of his commanders, who were all in the infantry blocks in the battle. Just to confirm, the reason why there's no Scots cavalry is that the Scots King James ordered his knights to dismount and fight as the Scots would have traditionally fought with the infantry.
Yeah. Yes. So you did almost lose your king at one point though.
Yeah, I nearly lost the king, but his bodyguard rallied.
So yeah. And I think the reason why he managed to win is essentially the Scots' plan of the day played out and worked quite well.
Mm-hmm.
He just moved across the centre and just smashed the middle of my army, and he didn't get bogged down as he did.
The main thing that I decided, which was a break from history, was not to wait for the outcome of the artillery duel.
Yeah, that did surprise me as well, but because I was hoping to try and pick you off with the artillery as you were coming towards me, but that didn't end up happening. So anyway, that's the...
One final thing. Are we going to roll to see if I capture the queen?
Yes, we'll do that.
So are we doing... How are we going to do that?
Should be an opposed roll.
Yeah. Opposed command roll.
Opposed command roll. So whoever gets a lowest score.
No, queen is safe.
So the queen is safe.
3.
Yeah. So we were thinking about possibly doing this into a campaign and fighting to see what would happen possibly next in the battle. In the campaign, if the Scots were victorious and continued. We'll have to have a think about that.
The main thing here is the amount of casualties that the English have actually taken.
Yeah, I've taken well over. I'm taken about 80% casualties here. Do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously,
that's
one
the
of
dead
the things
violence
that we need to look at is how would Suffolk, is it?
Suffolk, yes.
How would he report this to King Henry?
Very, very carefully. Very carefully indeed. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the English would probably retreat to Newcastle.
Yeah, it would be Newcastle. It would be either York or Newcastle they'd go to.
Newcastle's the closest, plus it's also a port.
Yeah.
And they can get the Queen out by boat.
Yeah.
Because that's the major advantage the English have, is that there's no real Scots navy.
No, there isn't. No.
So if the Scots were to move to besiege Newcastle, it wouldn't work as a full siege, except for the castle itself. But the English would still have a good chance of getting supplies in via boats. So
that'd probably end up... They'd probably be able to grind the Scots down in the siege then, because it turned into one of those massive affairs.
Yeah.
Of like a months-long siege.
Yeah.
That might be the next game, doing storming action or something.
Storming action, but obviously the Scots would have an advantage because the Scots artillery was all siege artillery.
Exactly. So we could get the additional siege artillery I've got, and that do a modified list for it.
Yeah, it's easy enough to build some broken walls with cardboard and polystyrene.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got our next project there. So we're going to end the video there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that.